He stood at the far end of the familiar street, suitcase pressed against his leg, fingers tightening around the handle as if letting go might make the moment disappear. 5 long years had passed since he last saw this place. 5 years of distance, silence, and carefully measured phone calls where he always said he was fine, and they always said the same. The house looked smaller than the one in his memory, the paint dulled by time, the old gate leaning slightly to one side, yet it still carried the weight of everything he was. This was where his dreams were born, where his fears took shape, where every sacrifice had begun. A slow smile touched his lips as he imagined his mother opening the door, eyes widening, hands flying to her mouth, his father standing behind her pretending not to be emotional while failing miserably. He had rehearsed it all on the long flight home, telling himself the surprise would finally make up for the missed holidays, the unanswered calls, the years of absence justified only by ambition. He took a deep breath and walked up the steps, his heart beating faster with every movement, then knocked. The sound echoed hollowly. He waited. Nothing. He knocked again, louder this time, excitement giving way to a thin thread of unease. The lights were on inside. The curtains were drawn. They had to be home. Without fully realizing what he was doing, he reached for the handle and felt it turn. The door opened with a soft creak, and the air inside felt strangely heavy, as though the house itself was holding its breath. He stepped in slowly, calling out their names, but his voice came back to him unanswered, bouncing off walls that felt less welcoming than they once had. The living room was tidy in an unnatural way, everything aligned perfectly, like a place prepared for display rather than living. His eyes drifted to the walls, to the family photographs that had once told a simple story of modest happiness. Some of them were gone, leaving faint outlines where frames had once hung. Others were new, unfamiliar. His parents smiling beside people he didn't recognize, in places he had never heard them mention. A tight knot formed in his chest. He walked closer, studying the images, trying to place them within the version of their lives he thought he knew, but nothing fit. His gaze fell to the coffee table, where a stack of envelopes lay neatly arranged. His name was written on every one. He froze. Slowly, he picked them up, flipping through dates that stretched back years. Letters that were never sent. Questions he was never allowed to answer. Explanations he never received. His hands trembled as a wave of confusion washed over him. Why keep them? Why hide them here? As he moved deeper into the house, a sense of wrongness followed him like a shadow. In the corner, partially hidden behind a row of books, he noticed a framed document. He pulled it out, eyes scanning lines of formal language until familiar words jumped out at him. His name, printed clearly, repeatedly, surrounded by terms he barely understood but instinctively feared. Trust, estate, beneficiary, guardianship. His pulse thundered in his ears, drowning out everything else. This wasn't just paperwork. This was a decision, a life-altering one, made without him. He dropped onto the couch, the weight of the moment pressing down until it was hard to breathe. Memories flooded back uninvited. His parents sitting at the kitchen table late at night, whispering about bills, his father's tired hands, his mother's forced smiles when money was tight. He remembered the guilt that drove him to leave, the promise he made to himself to escape poverty and save them all. That story had been his fuel through sleepless nights and lonely failures. And now, in the silence of this room, it felt like a lie carefully constructed to shape him into something they wanted. The sound of a door opening snapped him out of his thoughts. He looked up just as his mother stepped inside, grocery bags slipping from her hand and spilling across the floor. Her face drained of color as her eyes met his. Time seemed to stop. No joyful cry, no rush forward. Just shock, raw and unmistakable. You're here," she whispered, her voice trembling. His father appeared behind her, his expression tightening as his gaze dropped to the documents clutched in his son's hand. The moment he had dreamed of collapsed instantly, replaced by a cold, sinking realization. This surprise was never meant to happen. Whatever he had just uncovered, it was something they had worked very hard to keep buried. The silence stretched between them like a fragile thread, ready to snap, heavy and suffocating, until his mother finally bent to pick up the spilled groceries with shaking hands. Apples rolled across the floor, one stopping near his foot, and the normalcy of the moment felt almost cruel compared to the storm raging inside him. His father closed the door slowly, as if trying to contain the truth within these walls, then turned and leaned against it, avoiding his son's eyes. No one spoke for several seconds, and in that pause he felt something fundamental shift inside him, as though the ground beneath his carefully built life had cracked open. He stood up, the document still in his hand, and held it out between them like evidence at a trial. "What is this?" he asked quietly, though every muscle in his body screamed for an answer. His mother's lips parted, but no words came. Her eyes flicked to his father, silently begging him to speak. With a deep, defeated sigh, his father pushed himself off the door and walked toward the couch, moving as if the years had suddenly doubled on his shoulders. He sat down heavily, rubbed his face with both hands, and finally looked up. "We never wanted you to find out like this," he said, voice hoarse. The words hit harder than anger would have. They confirmed his fear that there was something to find out, something intentionally hidden. He felt a bitter laugh rise in his chest. "Find out what?" he demanded. "That you lied to me? That my whole life is built on things you decided I didn't deserve to know?" His mother sank into the chair opposite him, tears spilling freely now, her composure gone. She spoke in broken sentences, each one sounding like a confession pulled painfully from her. She told him about a relative he had never met, someone wealthy, someone complicated, who had left behind a business and property with one condition: that it be held in trust until he was old enough. At first, they said, it felt like a blessing. Then it felt like a responsibility. And eventually it became a secret they were too afraid to release. He listened, numb, as the story unfolded. They managed the trust in his name, signing documents, making decisions, convincing themselves they were doing it all for him. "We wanted you to focus on your studies," his mother said through sobs. "On becoming strong, independent." He clenched his jaw. "Independent," he echoed. "I left home because I thought you had nothing. I lived in a single room, skipped meals, worked jobs that broke my body because I believed I was your only hope." His father's eyes filled with tears. "We were proud of you," he said softly. "Every day." The words felt hollow. Pride built on deception tasted like betrayal. He stood and began pacing the room, memories colliding violently with the new reality forming in his mind. Every struggle he endured now carried a shadow. Had they watched him suffer and said nothing? Had they read his messages about exhaustion and loneliness while sitting on something that could have changed everything? Anger flared hot and sharp, but beneath it lay something deeper. Grief for the life he might have lived, the choices he might have made. "Why didn't you trust me?" he asked, stopping suddenly. "Why decide for me?" His father swallowed hard. "Because we were afraid," he admitted. "Afraid money would change you. Afraid you'd forget us." That confession cut deeper than any document ever could. He saw them then not as villains, but as flawed, frightened people who mistook control for love. Yet understanding did not ease the pain. "You taught me honesty," he said quietly. "You taught me to work for what I earn. And all the while, you were rewriting my life without my consent." His mother reached out instinctively, her hand trembling as it hovered in the air, unsure if she was allowed to touch him. He stepped back, and the small movement felt like a wall crashing down between them. The room grew darker as the sun dipped below the horizon, shadows stretching long across the floor, mirroring the distance that had suddenly grown within their family. The conversation continued in fragments, apologies, explanations, justifications, but none of them fully landed. He felt detached, as if watching someone else's life unravel. Every answer led to more questions. Every explanation deepened the wound. By the time the first streetlight flickered on outside, he realized something irreversible had happened. The image of his parents he carried in his heart, simple, struggling, entirely transparent, had shattered. In its place stood two strangers burdened by secrets, and a truth that could no longer be ignored. Night had settled fully by the time the weight of everything finally sank in, wrapping the house in a thick silence broken only by the ticking of the old clock on the wall. The familiar sound, once comforting, now felt like a countdown to something he couldn't yet name. He stood near the window, staring out at the street where he had played as a child, where he once believed life was simple and honest. Inside him, anger and sadness twisted together until he could no longer tell them apart. His parents sat behind him, small and still, as if afraid any sudden movement might push him further away. He finally spoke, his voice low but steady, carrying a pain that surprised even him. He told them about the nights he lay awake in a foreign country, calculating expenses down to the last coin, about the jobs he took that left his hands raw and his spirit exhausted, all because he believed there was no safety net, no hidden support waiting for him. He described the loneliness of success earned in silence, the emptiness of achievements he couldn't fully celebrate because guilt followed every step forward. As he spoke, his mother sobbed openly, and his father stared at the floor, jaw clenched, each word landing like a blow. He turned to face them, eyes burning. "Do you understand now?" he asked. "I wasn't just chasing a career. I was chasing survival." His father finally looked up, voice trembling as he admitted they had watched his struggle from afar, telling themselves that hardship builds character, that revealing the truth would somehow weaken him. Hearing that, something inside him broke cleanly, not with a loud crash, but with a quiet snap that left behind an unexpected calm. He realized then that the most painful discovery wasn't the hidden money or the secret estate, but the realization that love, when mixed with fear, can become a cage. He picked up his suitcase, the same one that had followed him through airports and unfamiliar cities, now heavier with everything he hadn't said. His mother stood and moved toward him, desperation in her eyes. "Please," she whispered, "don't leave like this." He paused, hand resting on the handle, and for a moment the boy he used to be, the one who trusted without question, fought to surface. He wanted to forgive them immediately, to erase the tension and return to something familiar. But he knew that pretending would only deepen the wound. "I'm not leaving forever," he said slowly, "but I can't stay tonight." He needed space to breathe, to rebuild himself outside the shadow of their decisions. He stepped outside into the cool night air, drawing a deep breath as tears finally spilled down his face. The stars above looked distant, yet steady, a quiet reminder that not everything had shifted beneath his feet. As he walked down the steps, he understood that his life had been divided into two parts, before this night and after it. The past no longer made sense in the way it once did, but the future, though uncertain, felt strangely honest. Behind him, the house stood silent, holding secrets no longer hidden. Ahead of him lay a difficult path, one of confrontation, boundaries, and painful conversations, but also the possibility of rebuilding his life on truth rather than illusion. He hadn't returned home to reclaim wealth or answers alone. He had returned to discover who he truly was when everything he believed about his family and himself was stripped away.